Hey, everybody, welcome to the latest edition of the Real Stories of Success podcast. I'm your host, Ryan Herget, sitting here with my partner, my good buddy, Austin Lahr. Austin, what is the good word today, man? As we are now 45 plus days into this crazy new adventure that we're all calling life.
Yeah. I like it. For those of you guys that are just listening, Ryan's actually in his car right now. So dealing with this change in COVID-19 stuff, you're actually sitting there waiting for a closing. Is that right? Do you even go into the closings now?
No, so that's what's changed. Like everything's just it's not different. It's just, well, it is different. Everything's different. We don't go in, and every title company is a little different, but we don't go in and all sit around a table and sing kumbaya anymore. They actually bring us papers in the car. We sign those papers in the car, and depending on the client's comfort level, sometimes I'm in the car with them, sometimes I'm FaceTiming them all throughout the signing, but it's different. It's simply different. But what I'm excited about right now is this closing and another one I've got later on today. Both of these closings, I've only met the customer once. And I don't say that to be proud of that, but I say we have done everything the way we're doing it right now. You know, we're doing this, this over Zoom, and I've done all of their inspections. I've done everything through technology. And I'm super excited about that, just because as the world moves forward right now, I think it's forcing people to think in different ways and find ways to be more efficient. And it's kind of exciting, man. It's kind of exciting. So
yeah, that is neat, right? It's amazing what we can all figure out when we have to figure it out.
That's it. I think that's just it. It's like, when you have to do something, you find a solution, especially if you're around awesome people. And so, yeah, it's just everything's moving forward, and there's certainly no shortage of people that are struggling and going through some incredibly hard times right now. But again, there's so much good that I feel is coming out of this as we innovate and move forward with things. So speaking of that, we've got probably one of the coolest guests on today that I am uber excited to dive into her story on. You've been telling me about our guest for months and months and months now, and we've finally been able to get her on the show. So who are we talking to today, Austin? I am super excited for this conversation.
Yeah, speaking of awesome people, I say this a lot. I'm really excited for our guest. I literally could not be more excited for our guest today. We've got Sarah Middleton. For you guys that are in the mortgage industry, you'll know that name for sure. But Sarah did about 800 units in one year, and for those loan officers out there, she did it with just an assistant and a processor. That's crazy numbers, right? About 165 million. She's run branches that are $1 billion. Now she's the president of sales and recruiting for Fairway Mortgage, which is top 5 in the nation in purchase business. And also one of the coolest things and we're going to dive into this too, is she's the founder and CEO of Ignite Coaching. That's got just under 1,000 students in that too, after just about 3 years. So Sarah, welcome. We are so excited to have you.
I'm just honored. I'm very honored to be on, Austin. So thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Austin. It's just a pleasure to be here.
Yeah. Well, let's get right into it. I really want to get into the beginning, right? I think that a lot of our audience, they might be starting out, or they might be in that middle range, and they see 800 units and they're like, no way, that's never going to be me. Kind of take us through the beginning. What got you started in an industry, and maybe some of those beginning steps. I know that you didn't just start doing 800 units. What was that look like? What's that look like?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's just such a fun question. I just want to, I want to do both my parents. I just want to do a quick shout out to them in heaven. I was raised by two very, very hardworking, incredibly committed, dedicated parents. And my mother, Ryan, you'll love this. She was the #1 realtor in the state of Colorado for 5 years in a row in the 60s, late 60s and early 70s. She was also the first female builder in the state of Colorado. And last thing was, she was the first female licensed stockbroker in the state of Colorado in the 60s. So
I love that.
Yeah. So if that gives you any kind of idea, just the beginnings was just having that example of my mother and my father, who World War II just an incredible human being, and having that foundation for me to just absolutely not think about boundaries or things not being doable because of what my mom and my dad both had overcome. So I was very fortunate for that. And being raised in a situation where, my mother was reading Think and Grow Rich and, Og Mandino and Zig Ziglar. And I was exposed to that as a kid. I don't know a lot of kids. I'm a baby boomer. And I just kind of look back at that, and that was huge for me. So just want to say that first. My mom actually was the one who introduced me to my boss, my first boss, Jack Teagarden. And I interviewed with him. I actually interviewed with him 7 times because nobody just goes into the industry. They don't just fall into it. And I didn't have any, I didn't have any history in the industry other than I had sold timeshare for the Marriott prior and had done really well. I was the top salesperson for them. When in my, I was like 22 years old, I was the top Mary Kay salesperson, door-to-door sales. I did door-to-door sales in high school for cookware.
Wow.
I was a Girl Scout, sold Girl Scouts. I didn't like because there was a lot of kind of home eccy, crafty things, and I just wasn't raised around that. But, just always kind of came up in that sales mindset. And so when I interviewed with him and had 7 interviews, and I finally threatened him and said, I'm going to go to work for a competitor, said the name of the competitor because I had interviewed with him. And I said, if you don't hire me, you're really going to regret it.
Oh, I love that. That's
yeah. So he hired me, and back then, there just wasn't coaching, there wasn't training. He actually gave me a phone book and told me to just start calling, and that just seemed like a really strange sort of way to go about the business. And so I talked to my mom, and my mom just said, hey, builders are out there, they're sitting on site, just go visit them. And so that sort of started me out. One of the things that Austin knows about me is I'm very committed to having a system, and systems apply to everything. And even though I didn't really have a name for it back then, I became very systematic about my sales calls. So my became a habit early on in my career. And I made sales calls, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday morning, and I would be in my car. I know this sounds really OCD, so I apologize, but I was in my car by 8:22, and then I was on the road, and I had a certain number of realtors, referral partners, and builders that I had to hit each day. And I just took them a goodie bag. I just put a card in there and laminated it. We didn't have cell phones, right, back then. Again, I'm 60 years old, but, I just put my number on there, and I had my pager. So I would run around trying to find pay phones. And, one of the things I put on there was that I would return their call in 5 minutes or less. So you can imagine if I was in my car trying to find a payphone and quarters in the car. So thank goodness for the first giant brick cell phone. But, looking back again, I'm just definitely not smarter or have more talent than so many people in the industry. Consistency was huge and is huge for me. So the Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Saturday thing went on literally for almost my whole career, where I got to the point where I'd go in to call on realtors that I'd been working with for 17 years. And they're like, you don't have to keep doing this, right? Always bring them something of value, just some little goodie. And I'd always be giving them information. And then, we started doing kind of lunch and learns early on. Nobody was really doing it, and partnering with a title company, and just always continually bringing value to everybody we worked with. And we were really, truly part of their team. I saw myself, probably because of the way I was raised, that I was part, Ryan, of your team. So I would enforce the relationship with the buyer and you and talk about you. I would enforce I'm a Denver girl born and raised, and I know every nook and cranny of, of our state. I love our state. And wherever a buyer was buying, I got to know, if I didn't know it, I got to know the area, the house, what they were doing to help come behind the realtor to really help them. Just anything I could do just to be a great teammate was another thing that was huge growing up was sports in our family. So I played softball from the time I was 8 years old through college. And then I played 1 year of semi-pro ball. And I think I made $700 that whole year playing. But back then it was just a really fun adventure. So anyway, does that start us out? That was a long answer to a really good question.
Oh my gosh, I've got notes and notes and notes here that I want to dive into. We'll probably not have enough time on this podcast for all of it, but I want to circle back to something you said early on here, and that is that you had some amazing parents. It sounds like that absolutely instilled just some incredible habits and beliefs in you, and you said something that I think absolutely holds so many people back is you never believed that you couldn't do it. You had people around you that were always telling you that you could and finding solutions. And I think that's so amazing because it sounds crazy to do 888 units in a year, but you did it. And that's such a deterrent, I think, for a lot of people that don't have that belief. Where did that come from? Was that something that your parents just absolutely always instilled within you? Was that something that you kind of had to learn some lessons on? Tell me about that, because that's huge, I feel.
Oh, look, I mean, we all go through, hardships and adversity. And I'm not going to sit here and tell you that my parents were perfect. My mom was a workaholic, and so was my father. And, sometimes I used to look back and kind of laugh because I ate TV dinners for about 12 years of my life until I, started figuring out how to make something different. But they were great parents. They just weren't the typical parents back then. And my mom, I will never forget it. I always was, wanted to fit in with the girls at school. And I remember my mom saying, you know what, the value of fitting in will be far exceeded by achieving the goals that you want to set. And so you have to make sure. And again, she was listening and reading and doing, like she read Cahill Gibran. And I mean, I can just go back and just think about all the stuff that my mom was doing that just instilled in me this place where, again, I just thought, you know what, it really comes down to who you surround yourselves with. And having 2 or 3 incredible friends that believe in you and they believe in what you're going for is huge. So I ended up hanging out when I was a kid, and I hung out from, we were very fortunate, same neighborhood for a very long time, with a group of boys. And the boys played a lot of sports, and I just went to my 40th year reunion in 2017. And I was sitting with this group of guys, and they're still friends. And we were talking about how I forced my way into their group, right? And they included me, and I learned how to play sports, with those guys. And it's interesting because a couple of the guys have really excelled in life. And one of them in particular, who's been a great friend since I was 8 years old, shout out to him, Jeff Williams. His mother also was a big Zig Ziglar, Og Mandino, and Jeff was one of the most positive, or is one of the most positive people that I've ever met in my life. And so getting with those guys was the surge, right, as a kid.
Wow.
So that really, and not to say, my childhood, my high school and college, there's always stuff, right? You always go through hardships, and I made a ton of mistakes. But the big thing about mistakes is you just have to you have to really just, reset it and just go, what did I learn from it? What can I do different? How can I be better? And you don't listen to the chatter, because people want to, that aren't going for it. Austin knows this. They don't necessarily want to see you succeed, and that's okay. That's all right. You just have to, figure out the circle around you and the people that believe in you. Just keep setting bigger and bigger goals.
I think that's amazing what you just said there. And just to peel that back a step further, it sounds like, and transitioning into kind of where I want to go next with this, but you've always put great people around you. And those people, I mean, we're all going to have challenging days in this industry or any industry. There's things that happen, but when you have that great group of people around you that are moving in that same direction, that's got to be amazingly powerful. And it sounds like that even transitioned into what you guys started with Ignite Coaching. Tell me about that. Where did that desire, that drive to really pour into people and share your knowledge, where did that really come from? Because it sounds like it's just had amazing results in just a handful of years since you guys started the Ignite Coaching program.
Yeah, so I got to, again, I got to do a shout out to our CEO, Steve Jacobson. He's another one. He's just thinks so big and he thinks so differently. And when I came to Fairway, he had asked me to coach a few of our people that he wanted me to help. And I love coaching. I mean, you're just, you're kind of a natural coach, right? You just grow up and you're just coaching each other and, friends and coached all the way through the industry with my team and our loan officers that were in the branch. But yeah, Jake was the one, and that's my nickname for Jake. I've known him since 1989, but he was the one who really put that idea. We were talking one day, there had been a situation with an outside coaching company. And he said to me, and my nickname is Kobe, that comes from my husband way, way back. He said, Kobe, why don't we start a coaching company? And I was like, wow, that I would love to. And, he's also a big thinker, big believer, and doesn't think inside the box, right? So Austin knows we were in Santa Barbara in that room with Kevin McGovern and John Tobias, and the four of us, it ended up all these people wanted to do it, but they didn't have the time to commit to it. And you understand that, right? When you go on this journey, you understand who's with you and who's not with you. And we launched it and we just started working at it and clipping away at it. And it was just, it's a miracle. And Fairway has really supported us. Jake believes in us. And when somebody believes in you, that's another piece I think is so big, Ryan, is when you believe in people and you say it. Like, I believe so much in Austin. I believe Austin's just getting started in his career. And I see this greatness in him and where he can go with it. And I think that's one of my, again, I have a ton of stuff that isn't great, but one of my, whatever people call it, superpowers is I love to speak life when I see that gift in others and to call it out, to call it into being. And I think that's something that, we all could use a little bit more of, because, people kind of hold it in like they're trying to save it for themselves. And I'm like, geez, just give it away. And it just continually multiplies the goodness.
So much there, Sarah, and you are so good at this. Like it is a true natural talent for sure. I do want to go back just a little bit. So, we kind of skipped over. We did the beginning. We did Ignite, which is right now, and tell us about the journey to becoming president of sales and recruiting. Like, how do you go from being that loan officer to, gosh, what is there, 3,000 licensed originate? What do we have? About 2,500, 3,000, something like that?
Yeah. I think we have 2,800 licensed originators. Yeah. Not all of them are originating, but, there's loan officer assistants and different components throughout corporate. This will make you all laugh, but, when I was younger, I wanted, everybody wants to be something when we're growing up, and I wanted to be, I wanted to be a CEO. And that was, again, who gets raised with that kind of thinking? And yeah, I just, as time goes on, you grow an origination practice, right? And then you set the vision and you want to have a branch. And I wanted to have a branch, and I made mistakes along the way. And then you want to have a region, and you start growing a region. And then you understand, I want something more. And I wanted to be the head of sales. That was something that was coming into my mind. And so anyway, I was at a company prior, and they changed my pay. I'd been there for 8 years. And I'm a very, very loyal person. I'll work my heart out. I'll work myself till I'm dead in my seat. And they changed my pay basically with an email. And I had not seen Jake since 2008. And for whatever reason, and this is how God works, I'm a very faith-filled person, Jake's name came into my mind. Weird, right? And that was 2013. So 2008, I saw Jake and picked up the phone and called Fairway. And I just left a message. And another company had been courting me, and I was talking to them. And then I got to talk to Jake, and it, just reconnected, just that old friendship, and just trust him. He's just such a great leader for us in so many facets. I feel like I get to play for, Bill Belichick, Nick Saban, Urban Meyer. He's just all of that into one. Greatest coach. Honestly, he'll probably be like, I just feel so blessed to be here. And so when I met with Jake, he saw that in me and asked me to come to Fairway to be president of sales and recruiting for us. So, and I knew, I left 400 people behind at my prior company, again, taking risk. You have to take risk, and you have to be okay failing. Risk and failure doesn't scare me. And I think that's another part of this journey, is you have to be okay with failure. And failure just, it can set you back for a little bit, and you get help with your circle of influence. And, if you have a great faith foundation, that God's got you, and you go on to the next thing, And so I just always want to be growing too. That's a big part of that about me. And I want our people to always be growing and learning. So good for your brain. It's just so good for your health to keep learning.
Tell us about that a little bit, because as we're having this conversation, we're about 45 days into the COVID-19 pandemic. And, while I've seen so many of, the people at Fairway, and there's so many people in our industry that are continuing to do very, very well by doing the things that you laid out earlier. I mean, being consistent with what makes money in this industry, people are continuing to have success. But I also know there's a lot of people that have maybe been beat up a little bit. They're going through some of those challenges right now. Maybe their spouse got laid off, but they're still in this industry. How do you help somebody, maybe if you're coaching them, deal with that failure that maybe they're going through, and what's the road to overcoming that and getting back to where they need to be, or maybe where they once were?
Yeah, I mean, again, we all go through different failures in our life. I think you have to be willing. I'm going to go back a ways. I was a really, really horrible loan officer the first 3 years, and I did a ton of business. And I want to do a shout out to my team, because the two gals that Austin was talking about, they're at Fairway, and Kathy Previtt and Kenoy Ruberson, they made me in my career. They absolutely made me. And they came onto my team. Kathy came a little bit earlier, and then Kenoy later. But those women complimented me. They were what I'm not. And they also called me out on my BS. But there was another woman by the name of Betty Connor, who was our head underwriter. So going to the part about failure, Ryan, she had taken me to lunch one day, and I thought she was taking me to lunch to tell me how wonderful I was, I had an ego back then, and I have to. We all have egos. We just have to stomp it down every day and just make the decision to be a helper. And she was taking me to lunch actually to fire me, and then she told me that because I was the number one loan officer at our company, but I was just a train wreck, and just constant chaos. Didn't take the time to really become a professional at it because I was going so hard and so fast. And that's one of my gifts. And it's also one of my curses is I can go too fast. And I know that about myself. And so she was there to fire me, and I was devastated. I'd never been fired, and I had a lot of jobs. I mean, my parents had me working from the time I was, 10 years old. It was child labor stuff wasn't around back then, but I was always like the best worker, and waitressing, cleaning houses, whatever I was doing, I was the best worker. And Betty checked me hard, and I begged her not to fire me, and I told her I would change. And what did I need to do to change? And so Betty gave me criteria, and I had to get up really, really early in the morning and be at her office. And I was a single mom, and I'd be at her office at 5:45, 6 a.m., and we'd be going through files. And that took about a year for her to retrain me and teach me how to put a file together. So to answer your question, when you go through failure, I think you have to be introspective and look at yourself, and it's really hard. And people who don't do it, they don't progress forward. They just don't. You see them get stuck, and then they get stuck in whatever the situation is or was, and then they're playing the victim. And you see a lot of that going on right now in COVID, right? So again, and there's a lot of people that have lost their jobs. But again, I'm seeing a lot of people get hired that lost their jobs. And that's really cool. And everybody's been touched by it. So these are like my daughter's friends who got laid off in New York, and then they came back to Denver and they got jobs, and they're getting after it. So I think you have to, number one, you've got to adjust, right? You got to be introspective, look at yourself. What do you need to change? And then pull yourself out. And that's hard to do. It's hard. Trust me. I can think of a few situations where, you can just wallow in it. And I have done that. And then you say, what is this doing? What is this sitting in this situation, wallowing in it? So what do I need to do? Austin knows this about me. I listen to anywhere from, 1.5 to 2 hours on sermons, podcasts a day. And I read typically a half an hour to 45 minutes every night. That's really important. Change your mindset, right? To come out of failure, you have to make a decision. My husband said to me last night, what do we need to do right now with where the world is to make progress? Because again, I love this quote, never let a good crisis go to waste. So how can we capitalize on this crisis? Where's the gaps where we can take advantage of what's going on in the economy and continue to build our businesses? And I just love that, because again, you got to keep dreaming, right? You got to just keep thinking larger. And how can I go there? If you stay in the pit, you can't go there.
That is gold and a half. I absolutely love that breakdown. And thank you so much for deep diving into that. I hope everybody goes and hits rewind on that a couple times, because there was a huge amount of value in there. But Sarah, we could absolutely keep this conversation going all day long. I could sit here and pick your brain for hours, and we'll absolutely have to have you on the show again sometime. But tell us, how does our audience get a hold of you? If somebody's got some questions about Fairway, if they just want to reach out to you, how does our audience connect with you? Obviously, they can with Austin too, but tell us about that.
Yeah. So, I definitely try to be available. That's one of Austin and I's little fun games we play. We try to beat each other to see.
He's actually better at it than I am. And I thought I was.
That's saying something.
I thought I was really good.
Actually, Jake's better than all of us, but
that's true.
Speed of response is a really big thing. And again, I love Bob Goff, that he picks up the phone when you call them. And I try to do that too. I try to pick up the phone. So my number is 303-809-5088. I'm actually kind of old fashioned. I like to hear your voice. You can certainly text me too. And feel free to email me at smiddleton, just like, Kate Middleton, at fairwaymc.com. No relation. I didn't get to go to the wedding, but feel free to reach out. So
I can't say thank you enough. This has been one of our greatest episodes. So many takeaways for everybody here. And just truly appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. It's an honor to be here. Appreciate you guys.
Well, thank you so much, Sarah. We definitely appreciate it. And that'll wrap up another edition of the Real Stories of Success podcast with Ryan and Austin. Thanks so much, everybody. We appreciate it.
See you guys.
Thank you.